What are Charlestown's risks from coastal flooding both today and in the future? This is the focus of Coastal Resilience Solutions for Charlestown Phase 2, a planning effort led by Climate Ready Boston. This project focuses on the Charlestown coastline, starting northeast of Schrafts Center and through Charlestown Navy Yard and Paul Revere Park in the southeast. This video shares an overview of the potential coastal flood risks facing Charlestown due to climate change. It shows what these risks look like now and how they might change if we don't take any action. When you picture coastal flooding, what comes to mind? Maybe it's a stormy day where waves come up over the shoreline and fill up our streets and T stations with water, much like what we saw during the winter storms of 2018. This flooding includes both waves and storm surge, the elevated ocean levels that we experience during a nor'easter or a hurricane. But there is another type of flooding which can happen even on a sunny day, called tidal flooding. While this type of coastal flood hazard is less severe than storm surges, it still poses risks to our communities. Tidal flooding already happens in Boston during annual high tides, or king tides, in some locations. For example, you may have seen pictures from Long Wharf, which floods a couple of times every year. Coastal flooding is the result of sea level rise, which has been caused by climate change. Sea level rise has already had an impact on our communities. Over the last 100 years, sea levels have risen by nearly a foot in Boston Harbor, which has led to increased flooding every year. Over the next 50 years, it is expected to rise by another 40 inches. That's almost 4 feet. Sea level rise will result in higher tides and more frequent flooding during sunny day conditions. It will also lead to higher and more destructive storm surges and larger waves. This means that if we do nothing about it, we can expect floods to be deeper and reach further into our communities from the coast over the next 50 years. So what does coastal flooding mean for Charlestown? Let's start by taking a look at the flooding risk today. Here is Charlestown today. The project study area is shown in the dark dashed line. Now let's take a closer look at the risk of flooding. The red arrows on the map indicate potential flood entry points. These are the places where coastal flooding can more easily flow onto dry land from low-lying areas. As you can see, there are quite a few across the waterfront. These flood entry points are the areas we really want to pay attention to. If they can be blocked, we can reduce the risk of flooding to our communities. Because Charlestown has a largely flat waterfront, we believe an effective solution will need to address all entry points. Blocking just one could create or increase risks at other entry points. Later you'll see how these flood entry points can grow over time. What areas would be at risk of flooding from coastal storms? First, it's helpful to think of flood risk like the lottery or rolling dice. While the odds of flooding vary depending on storm types, the overall odds of flooding will increase every year due to climate change. Now let's take a look at 3 different flooding scenarios. Each one shows the impact of flooding from an increasingly severe storm type. First, severe winter storms or nor'easters. Flooding from this storm type has about a 1 in 10 chance of occurring in any year. The areas in blue indicate the places that would experience this flooding. This includes the piers along the harbor and the northern edges of the autoport. Second, a more severe winter storm, similar to Winter Storm Riley in 2018 or the blizzard of 1978. Flooding from this storm type has about a 1 in 100 chance of occurring in any given year. A 1% chance of flood occurring in a year may not sound like a lot, but these add up over time. For example, within a 30-year mortgage, a house in this area would have a 1 in 4 chance of experiencing this flooding. This storm type could expand flooding around the USS Constitution and from the Little Mystic Channel northward onto a few isolated areas around the autoport. Third, an even more intense storm. A storm this severe has only a 1 in 1,000 chance of happening in any year. However, when it does occur, it would cause significant damage and disruption. In this coastal storm, flooding expands a little further inland, including areas along First Avenue and Constitution Road, around the USS Constitution and Constitution Wharf. Another flood pathway expands to the west around Ryan Playground and the Schrafft's site. This flood pathway was the focus of the Phase 1 Charlestown study and is outside of the Phase 2 boundary. If we do nothing to protect the neighborhood from coastal flooding, the red lines here show the streets that would be flooded in the most severe flood, the 1 in 1,000 chance flood. Roads within the eastern parts of the neighborhood and the autoport are the most at risk. Let's take a look now at how 9 inches of sea level rise affects flood risk. This amount of sea level is projected by the year 2030. With 9 inches of sea level rise, the same flood entry points that you saw before still remain, shown here in lighter colored arrows. However, we also expect to see new flood entry points, mainly around the Little Mystic Channel. Here is how the risk of flooding from the storm types we looked at earlier changes with 9 inches of sea level rise. First, severe winter storms or nor'easters are likely to cause more rare floods on a more regular basis, affecting familiar areas along the Navy Yard, Autoport, and surrounding streets and buildings. An event of this type is expected to impact about 400 residents. Second, a more severe winter storm expands further through the Navy Yard and Autoport property. An event of this type is expected to impact about 2,200 residents. Third, an even more intense storm would continue to expand risks further inland. While flooding would generally be contained within the Navy Yard and Autoport, it would also affect areas like Berry Playground. An event of this type is expected to impact about 2,600 residents. Red lines highlight roads that could be flooded. Almost all roads within the Navy Yard and Constitution Wharf are at risk, as well as access into the Autoport along Terminal Street. Let's fast forward to when seas have risen 40 inches. That's currently projected to be at least 50 years from now, by the year 2070. New flood entry points, indicated by darker red arrows, continue to emerge around the Little Mystic Channel, affecting almost all of the Charlestown waterfront. Here's what flooding from those various entry points could look like in those same storm types. With 40 inches of sea level rise, the effects are much more widespread. First, severe winter storm or nor'easters would affect all areas of the Navy Yard, Autoport, and areas along the south edge of the Little Mystic Channel. An event of this type is expected to impact about 3,200 residents. Second, the more severe winter storm would bring flooding further inland, with water flowing through the neighborhood and connecting between Little Mystic Channel and the Navy Yard. This storm would now put at risk part of the Bunker Hill housing around Tufts and Corey Streets, and the Charles Newtown apartments. An event of this type is expected to impact about 3,700 residents. Third, an even more intense storm would affect a slightly larger area. An event of this type is expected to impact about 4,600 residents. Additional streets in Charlestown would become at risk of flooding. It is important to note that this risk is not today's risk, but tomorrow's long-term risk by the year 2070. While the amount of flooding may be scary, the good news is that we have time to plan for it and adapt to it. This is why we are developing coastal resilience solutions today. You've seen where flooding could occur now and in the future, but you may be wondering, how deep would that water be? Let's zoom into an area along the Little Mystic Channel by the Charles Newtown apartments to get a better sense of how flood levels are projected to change. Here's a snapshot of the waterfront along the Little Mystic Channel with Charles Newtown apartments to the left. Today, flood depths could range from 0 to about 1.5 feet in the 3 storm scenarios. With 9 inches of sea level rise, depths could increase to 6 inches to almost 2.5 feet. With 40 inches of sea level rise, depths would be in the range of about 3 feet to just under 6 feet. As you can see, coastal flooding is a serious threat. Our communities are at risk now, and due to climate change, the risks will only increase in the future. But the good news is that we have time to design solutions and take action to help protect Charlestown and Boston as a whole. We hope that improvements to reduce the risk of flooding can also contribute to a better waterfront for your neighborhood. But we can't do this alone. Please join us and contribute to developing solutions to protect your neighborhood. Find out how you can get involved by visiting the project website. Thanks.